Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positivity here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. She is the daughter of the legendary Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington. She is a manager currently in the wrestling business, traveling all around the world, and I'm so pleased to have her on here today. She's going to tell a wonderful, inspiring story. Pleased to welcome the Dynamite Doll, Bronwyne Billington. Welcome to Wrestling with Heart.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to meet you.
Yes, so nice to meet you as well. So before we get into your dad, let's talk about you. Where are you from? Tell me about your childhood and upbringing.
So I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So born and raised here. My dad had moved here from England, obviously, when he first started with Stampede Wrestling here, and eventually met my mom. And so yeah, I was always raised with wrestling around me, around the Hart family, and I just never knew any different. Always backstage at WWF shows. I was too young for Stampede Wrestling, but it's just always been a part of my life. So as I was in my 20s, early 20s, that's when I first started getting involved in wrestling. And it was something kind of like a love-hate relationship between wrestling and I. It always kind of come and go into my life. And it kind of just came to a place where it's like, I can't ignore it anymore. It's just a part of my life. Why am I trying to push this away? And I ended up loving it and accepting it. And here I am, 40 years old and still giving it my all.
Yeah, I mean, you've embraced it. It's in the blood. You know, coming from a wrestling family, the pressure is sort of like on, or if, you just feel like, oh man, your family is doing it, I might as well get involved. So that's pretty cool growing up around the business, in the business. Do you remember like having like the action figures or the games, or do you remember like the first exposure you had to wrestling? I guess we'll start with that.
First exposure, gosh, it was probably just my dad kind of coming off the road, those long tours, when he'd be wrestling in Japan when I was super young. So I'm gonna say probably that. But yeah, I do remember the wrestling figures. Like I still have the rubber, what are they, NJFs or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
LJNs.
LJ, yeah, gosh. And I always want to say MJF for some reason. Like, what's my whatever they're called, you know what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
And I had the wrestling buddies as well. I don't think they ever made one on the Bulldogs, but I remember Macho Man and the Ultimate Warrior. We had those growing up, and the ring, like the play ring. And I actually was fortunate enough to grow up with an actual ring in my backyard. So pretty much whoever's house we went to, there was a ring. If I was at my Uncle Brett's house, there was a ring. We had a ring in my backyard growing up, and then at the Hart house, there was always a ring. So
Did you get
we were
to play in it at all? And
we were always playing around in it. I mean, there was always, my dad would be training his friends, or whoever would come over. But then if no one was actually training, us kids would just be playing in there. We'd just be rolling around, and that was our playground.
so adorable, really getting the chance to do that. And then look where you are now in the business. I've watched some interviews with you previous doing my research. You first last had contact with your dad at 6. Is that correct? He had just left for a tour.
No, so okay, so he left when I was 6. He moved back to England
Hmm.
when my parents split. And then I started acting out in school, and everyone's like, "Oh my God," I'm the eldest child, so my uncle and my mom and my aunt, they're like, "She's acting out, like she needs to see her father." So my uncle Brett actually flew me and my younger brother out to see my dad. So I was 10 at that time. Um, I'm not sure. Are you from the States?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that's about grade 5 here. I'm not sure about there, but so I started acting out in school, and so my uncle flew us out to go see my dad. And then after that, though, we hadn't seen each other for 15 years. So there was a time there we were talking, Like we would talk every Sunday on the phone, but then there was a period there where we stopped talking and didn't. So the whole time not seeing each other was 15 years. Didn't talk for about 10, I think.
That's just so hard, when you're
Yeah.
when you have memories with your dad and then he's going away for a long period of time. It's just you lose part of your soul in there because you're trying to capture those moments, savor those moments, and we'll talk more about that later on. But mentioned you were backstage at wrestling shows growing up. Any memories of running into like the Hulkster or Macho Man, or what was that like being backstage?
So I can't remember meeting Hulk Hogan. I must have, maybe. I just can't recall, being a young kid. But all my memories are with Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. They were the kids' favorites. Miss Elizabeth loved having us around because they didn't have children of their own, so we were always welcomed into their locker room. Like some of the wrestlers, if you had a big name, like they'd have their own locker room. So we were backstage with them a lot of the time. And I do remember meeting Andre the Giant, which is pretty cool. I just wish that I had a photo because back then you didn't really carry around cameras, right? I
They
was
did the
about
Polaroids.
Yes, and I have Polaroids with Miss Elizabeth and Macho Man, but I just didn't have one at the time when I met Andre the Giant. But that's one of the coolest people I ran into because I would have been about 7 years old, and I remember shaking his hand, and his hand just like covered my whole arm. Like this man is huge. She's a real giant. As a child, I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, I mean, he was this big dude, mountain of a man. The Giants in wrestling are just so vital. They've got your bigger guys, you got your smaller guys, but then you got like these 7 foot dudes that are tall or towering over you, and that's like
Yeah.
what makes pro wrestling so unique. So that's cool that you got to meet Andre. I'd imagine he was so friendly.
Yeah, it was short-lived because it was WrestleMania in, I believe, LA, 1992, I think.
It
And
was
we were just like
91.
91, yeah, we were just in the lobby. And I can remember him just standing there. And I think I was with my Uncle Brett because we went on that trip. My dad had just left. So he took, I think it was just me he took on the trip with his kids. And so I was with my Uncle Brett, and then I just see this tall giant standing in the lobby, and there was like pianos. I can remember there was like pianos, and he's just kind of
Mhm.
standing there, and he introduced me. So yeah, that was super cool.
Yeah. Well, your father definitely had quite the legacy in the business. Really very inspiring, influential, paved the way for so many people. You mentioned Brett, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, and just so many other people, especially with the modern era. Bryan Danielson is one, Rey Mysterio, Ricochet, like all these high-flying guys. Really, it all started with him. He was like one of the first to ever do it. What was it about pro wrestling for your dad that made him go, man, I could do this?
Well, my dad always played sports in school, and he didn't do well in like core subjects, but he always excelled in sports. So everything he did, he excelled in. And gymnastics was something that he actually did as a young child. So I think that that just like transferred over really well. And also, we came from a boxing family. My dad came from a long line of bare knuckle boxers. So his father was trying to get him into boxing, and then he discovered pro wrestling and was like, no, dad, like I want to do this. So I think it was just a really nice transition of like boxing and gymnastics.
And there's a lot of similarities with boxing, but with wrestling, it's very combat, more physicality. And
Yeah,
so you
more
see
of the
nowadays,
yeah, like the mat work. He was, he started with catch wrestling and in England, and yeah, just the storytelling. I think wrestling has more of that than like boxing does, right? So I think that was part of the draw for him.
and back then you had the territories. Before you had like the big companies, you had so many different territories across the world, and England had a really big territory at that time too.
Hmm. Yeah.
And what can you tell me when you had conversations with him about his first trainer getting started in the business? Did you ever talk to him about that?
Not really. I've just kind of read it in his book. I know about, yeah, Ted Bentley and how they met and all that. So my dad and I reconnected. He had had some strokes. So by the time we reconnected, he was a man of very little words. So unfortunately, I didn't get like all those stories. but I'm fortunate enough that it is in his book, and lots of people share what they know. So I would love to see a biography. That's what we're missing, just to piece everything together.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a legacy over time. And he was trained by Stu Hart eventually too. The Stampede wrestling territory was huge in Canada.
Yes.
I mean, it's tough, you know. You talk about, tough as nails Stu Hart was. He really made sure his guys knew the business and
Yeah.
really made sure that the Dynamite Kid was able to be set up for success.
Yes, I think maybe at first he was a little unsure of my father because of his size. He came over, he was so young, so small. But as soon as he saw his work ability and his work ethic, he was like, okay, now we're talking. Let's see where this can go. And Stu was really, really fond of my father. So we we were not Hart family by blood, but we were welcomed into the family just as anyone else, because of that bond that they shared, and my mom too with the Hart family.
Did you ever get to meet Stu Hart?
Oh, yeah, all the time. We were there every Sunday night. Well, pretty much every Sunday. They had big family dinners, especially when the wrestlers were like back home from off the road. We were always up there Sunday nights. So I have lots of memories with all the cousins. And like I said, Helen Hart, she had a book with all her grandchildren's names in it because it was such a large family. She was so, as all grandmothers are, they're so proud of like how many grandchildren they have. They're like, oh, I have
Hmm.
40, or I actually don't know the exact number, but she has a book with all her grandchildren's names in it, and me and my siblings are in there as well. So we're the only ones that actually aren't Hart blood, but we're written down in there because we were just raised that way. My mom's sister married Bret Hart, is how I'm related to the family. So I'm only blood related to Bret's kids through my aunt's blood, right? But we were raised like part of the family, so we're no different.
What was it like being around Bret Hart, especially back then? Because he's just a legend in his own right.
I was such a shy child, and I don't know if that's to some people that's hard to believe. I don't know if it's just because I was raised with so many big men around me, like constantly, and I'm just this little timid girl, and I'm like, oh my God, I'd always hide behind my mom's leg, and she'd be introducing me to wrestlers. I'm like, I'd poke out and be like, hi, and then I'd go back behind her leg. So I think growing up, I was always super shy with Brett, even and because they were always on the road. So it's not like I got this like a ton of quality time with him. But I remember when he had his stroke, I wrote him this like beautiful letter, and he was in the hospital. And I'm like, because I was always so shy, and I'm like, I've never told you, but like I love you, and you're the best uncle. And so that was me kind of being like, I wish I wasn't so shy my whole life, and I wish I told you I loved you, but like this is how I feel about you.
You know, it's amazing to see that the tag team wrestling, especially back in the 80s, was huge. You had the Hart Foundation, the British Bulldogs with Davey Boy and your dad. You had the Killer Bees. All these different teams really like wanted to strive to be the best. And for a guy that was just 225, close to 230, entering the WWE, the land of the giants like Andre, Hogan, Macho Man. It was hard, I imagine, for a small guy to really break in the business, especially with a big company like WWE.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's why, he felt he had to do steroids. And a lot of the wrestlers did at that time. But regardless of his size, I think he really made a mark for himself, really made a name for himself, and made like such a difference in the industry today, right?
Hmm.
Um, Showing that little guys can do it. And if you look back at the matches even before steroids, like he was incredible when he first started out in England, even just bouncing around the ring like a ping pong ball. And the way he'd bounce off his head, I'm like, yeah, like where does this guy learn this stuff?
When you go back and watch some of his old matches, are there any that stick out to you? Like, I love this. I love this. I think this is a beautiful work of art almost.
Work of art, I mean, I have a hard time answering that question just because I'm really weird with even bands, for example. Like I'm huge into music. I have singers who are my favorite singers, but their band actually isn't my favorite band.
Hmm.
So to say like this is my favorite match because of this, I can't pinpoint it because I like different aspects of all different matches. But work of art absolutely is like Tiger Mask and my father. Just Any clip you see of them it's breathtaking and you can't take your eyes off it.
Yeah, they just put on so many great clinics. Who could forget like the matches they had in Japan and all around the world? And then of course you had, your uncle uh Brett wrestling the Dynamite Kid. I mean,
Yes. Love
that was a
any of the matches, yeah, the Hard Foundation versus Bulldogs. I absolutely love that too because it's like they're all family members and they're all brothers and brother-in-laws and they train together and it's just so the chemistry is just crazy.
what was Davy Boy like to be around?
He was super funny. He was like the big goofy, everyone's favorite uncle type. Yeah. But I mean, I didn't get a lot of time with him either because gosh, they were on the road so much.
Yeah.
And they lived in Florida half the time. So for most of my childhood, they were in Florida. But yeah, he was definitely the big, goofy, fun uncle. In his later years that I can remember when he was in Calgary, he had a big motorcycle. So the kids would love to like go on the back and take a little ride with Uncle around Stu Hart's house. And yeah, he's just this big, badass, goofy uncle.
When he passed away, it was just such a devastating loss. It
Very
really
much.
was. And so talking about your dad, um, it was a huge block of time. 15 years
Yeah.
last time you saw him. Why was it so long?
Well, I mean, distance, of course. I was all the way in Calgary and he went back to England. And when I turned 18, or I might have been 17 at the time, actually, I think I was 17. Well, no, I was about 18. Okay, so I was 17. My mom she was in her second marriage and she had a set of twins. And so I was 17 when they were born. My mom was, on maternity leave for a year. So then when I turned 18, I graduated high school. My mom went back to work and I nannied my little brother and sister and the twins until they went to school. So for 5 years of their life, like I was their nanny, that was my job. So I just saw like how beautiful and precious young babies were, like young children. And like, so I started questioning my dad, like, how could you leave us? How could and my mom was pregnant when my dad left with his third child. So I was like, how could you not want to like meet your daughter? How could you move another country away, like countries away? And I got to the stage where I started asking questions. And at the same time, I was also like, and I want to train to become a wrestler. So I wrote him this letter back in the day. You'd write letters, right?
Hmm.
I wrote him a letter and he never replied. And then I finally called him because I was like, so why haven't you, like, did you get my letter? He's like, yeah. I'm like, why haven't you replied? And he was like, I didn't like what it said. And like, he hung up the phone. Yeah. And I don't like telling the story because it makes him sound terrible, but like this is real life. And I don't like to sugarcoat anything. And I also like my story is about forgiveness and how you can move on and move
Hmm.
forward. And
Hmm.
eventually we did reconnect. But at that time, maybe he didn't know how to answer those questions, like why he left. And honestly, in the long run now, like now I realize he did what he did to protect us and he thought it was the best thing for us. And I truly, truly believe it was now that so much time has passed and, he definitely had, if you have you seen the Dark Side episode?
Yes.
Yeah. So like he had CTE and he knew something was wrong and he knew it was best if he eliminated himself from us before something bad could happen. And I really applaud him for that. We didn't looking back, you definitely don't want to end up being like another Chris Benoit story, right? So I think he knew something's wrong, something's off. Like I need to go back home and like just my kids will be better off this way, right? He left us with the house, everything he left us with. I have a beautiful, successful life because of the start he gave us as a family, which his career paved the way and provided us. Um, and then I think when he said, like, I didn't like what the letter said, I don't really know if he was talking about like like children part, how could he leave us, or me becoming a wrestler. I think back in the day, female wrestlers weren't very like they kind of frowned upon it. We didn't talk for I think 6 years after that,
6 years.
and then the internet came around, like Facebook came around, and that's how I reconnected with my cousins in England. And I had my first child, so she was 2 years old at that time, and I was like, something is missing. Like I felt full when my daughter was born because I always knew I wanted to be a mother. And then after 2 years, I'm like, something's missing. I don't feel full. And I realized it was my father. I'm like, I'm missing my father in my life. And after I had a child, I realized, how hard it is and all the sacrifices you have to make. And we all just do the best that we can, and we're not all perfect. And so I thought about those things, and I went to England and I showed up. He didn't know I was coming, and I just showed up at his door. And that was the first time we'd seen each other in 15 years. And yeah, I'm really, really, really grateful that I did that.
Yeah, what a great story. I mean, talk about a turnaround. The fact that you were able to have this dream, this goal of wanting to be a wrestler and understanding why you were kind of turned away at the time and the fact
Yes.
that you were
And
able to.
everyone asks, like, why don't you wrestle now? And I think that was part of the reason. I all of a sudden then I was like, okay, but the reason I wanted to be a wrestler is I was hanging out with my cousin Ted Hart, and he had a wrestling school for kids. He was like, you need to be a wrestler. Like, how cool would that be? Dynamite Kid's daughter, right? I was the first child, so he's trying to get me in there. And I think I had this like idea in my head, if I do this, my dad will move back to Canada. And then I'll have my dad back. And then mom and dad are going to get back together and life's going to be great, right? Like that was my thought process.
Mhm.
I don't know if I really I never actually did any training or anything. That was just the beginning process of thinking I want to get involved in wrestling. But then with my dad actually not being interested and he didn't come back to Canada, I think I kind of closed that door for a while until later on when it opened back up. And then
Do you remember the last conversation you had with your father?
my dad, the last few years of his life, he was in a hospital, like the full-time care facility. He really couldn't talk. He could hardly string any words together. So my uncle would take the phone just up to his ear and would just say like, "I love you, Dad." And I'd try talking to him, and he would just kind of like mumble back. Couldn't really talk. But he could make out the words like, "I love you, Bronwyn." So, and I
Yeah,
can always hear his voice saying my name.
the you know it's very refreshing and it's very nice to have a story that is in a lot of ways it is a happy ending because you got the chance to reconnect with your dad, and not many people can say that they're able to reconnect with a parent if they're on the other side of the globe, or if they've got, they've had their issues over the years, their demons, they've been working through them, but you were able to do that. So it's very heartwarming.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to live with any regret. I knew that. And I knew, with wrestlers, the males, they don't have the longest lifespan. So I was like, I don't want to, regret it. Something happens to him and then I regret it. So I'm super, super thankful that I was brave enough to go do it. And I kind of got that closure. Like, yeah.
Well, now you've been in the business of how long have you, when did you start wrestling?
So I don't actually wrestle. I just manage.
Okay.
But getting involved in wrestling, it's 11 or 12 years now.
Okay, so it's been a while. And the cool thing about being a manager is that you get to talk a lot, you get to, you know, take bumps without having to be in the ring for a extended period of time. And I think that the managers don't really get as much credit, I feel like, because it's only about the wrestlers. And I feel like if you had just as much respect for the managers, I think it would be a win-win, don't you think?
Absolutely. And even being a female manager, I feel like it's hard to get noticed. You get forgotten about a lot, and a lot of people don't understand the importance of the role. So,
Yeah.
I always idolized Miss Elizabeth growing up, and that's who I emulated for so many years. I'd love to dress up and wear sequins and everyone loved me. But I'm kind of going down a different path these days. I'm the girl next door, but I'm a little bit crazy. So just stay tuned. It's always fun when I'm around.
And you've managed people like Davey Boy Jr.
Mhm.
and the
And
current Dynamite Kid Tommy.
yes, and
Uh,
his brother Mark as well. The two of them
yeah.
together.
So tell me about what how you feel, going on now 12 years being a manager. You feel like you've gotten everything down pat because I know there's a lot of work involved, just like with being in the ring, being a competitor.
I don't feel like I have it down pat because it's been a bit of a roller coaster for me. Trying to constantly find that person that you really connect with. You guys are on the same page. Um, so like people like my cousins, well, they're both on the road. So of course that was beautiful and magical because we're family. So it makes sense. Like the pairing makes sense. But my cousin's at AEW now, so he's on the road a lot. Harry's in Japan. So I'm not referencing them, but just someone more local that I can always work with. It's been a struggle finding my person.
Really?
Um, yeah, but I think I found someone, a few people, um, and we're kind of creating some magic now. We're all on the same page. We're treating it like a business, um, and we're really really excited.
Who are some of the people that you would like to manage in the future? Like if you had to pick like a dream, could be a male or female, like currently or even in the past, who would it be?
Um, Gosh, can let's just say Will Ospreay because he's my favorite and he's British and let's say him. But no, my dream has been my friend Black Dahlia who's in the States, and that's one of
Hmm.
the manifestations we're working towards. So, we met a few years ago and I'm like, when you get back in the ring, like I want to be the one managing you. And she's super close. She's been cleared to get back in the ring and train. And so we feel like it's coming and like our manifestations are coming true. And then I started working with a new wrestler that's out in BC. His name is Moondog Manson, and he's the one we've just connected and we're on the same page. Our friendship is like so super tight. He listens to me. He wants to utilize me, and that's been the struggle a lot in the past for me. Is like, yeah, I should be talking on the mic more. Like that's my job as a manager and that's what I want to do. And so he's actually like allowing me to like use my creative freedom to do that stuff. So we kind of started a faction called the Manson family. And the idea is it's like him and we're gonna just like grow our faction bigger. And Black Dahlia and Evil Nate fit right into that picture. So we're gonna be hopefully I'm gonna be traveling to the States soon, working with them, and then they're gonna come over here to Calgary, and then we'll go to BC too and just start doing shows out there as well.
Yeah, I've had both Dahlia, Black Dahlia, and Nate on my show before. They're just amazing people.
Oh my God, yeah. They're so amazing. So we just met in Philadelphia at the end of June, Battleground Championship Wrestling when I went there. We'd been friends on the internet for like 2 years, but we finally met in person, and now we're just like inseparable, full force. We're doing this, and they would fit beautifully into the Manson family. So
Are you a big fan of being a baby face or do you prefer being a heel?
Uh, I think you have more freedom being a heel. Babyface, that's what I loved at first, and that's kind of where I started. But I think that I'm transitioning into someone that can do more than just smile and wave and, shake baby's hands. So I like even being a tweener, kind of you do
Yeah.
the bad things, but people are cheering for you. That's perfectly us.
You can get away with so much more being the bad guy, so it's a
Yeah,
lot of fun, I'd imagine.
freedom and yeah.
Yeah, all right. Any desire to want to work for one of the big companies like a WWE or AEW? Is that something that you've thought about?
I'd love to be in AEW. Yeah, I follow them the most. WWE, I don't know, just I guess it got a little stale for me, perhaps. Watched it my whole life. So when AEW came out, it was super exciting. I know people are complaining they don't really like what they're doing, but I like the indie feel of it, like how you can even just, well, they have more creative freedom there for sure. And even just like being able to swear a little bit and like a little more blood, like it has that
Edgier.
indie, yeah, the indie feel a little more, which is what I really enjoy. But I love the women's division in WWE. That's really the only reason I tune in these days. I usually watch their big pay-per-views because I like to be like in the know and on top of my wrestling, but I don't watch like every week. But
Who's your favorite women's wrestler currently?
who is my favorite? I mean, of course, Natalia. That's a given.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In
Heart family
WWE,
connection.
though, yeah, in WWE, I love Liv Morgan, I would say. Um, oh, yeah, and then I think I'm loving Mariah May in AEW.
Yeah, I mean, AEW's also got a great women's division too, with Mercedes now there and Saraya, and
Oh, I love Serena.
Britt Baker.
Yeah.
So they're in good hands. I think that the more, it's good to have alternatives and other companies really thrive because I think it makes the business rise as a whole. We went through, I believe it was like 20 years where you just had maybe one or two companies, but now with the internet, you could get wrestling on your phone. You can go on YouTube and watch all your favorite companies it's amazing to see how far technology has come.
Yes, for sure. Like you used to not be able to look up Stampede wrestling for years and years and Japan wrestling, and now that's all accessible. So it's great. There's tons of wrestling, lots to choose from.
Yeah. And are your kids big wrestling fans as well?
So I have two daughters. They don't follow it, but they enjoy going to local shows. And I just took them both to Monday Night Raw like two Mondays ago. So that was my little one's first live event, like WWE event. So that was pretty cool for her. There was a lot of weapons that night, and then the next morning she's like, I had a dream that someone was hitting me with a stick. So I was like, okay, maybe you're not ready for live wrestling shows.
Maybe we may see them in the business in some form or fashion. Who knows?
Yes, very. My little one, or sorry, my eldest, she used to want to be a wrestler. She took gymnastics when she was younger, so I was like, you can easily transition. A lot of females, if they do gymnastics or like dance, transitioning into wrestling is pretty easy for them.
Yeah, I mean, look at Tiffany Stratton right now. She, I believe, came from that background and she's a rising star in the WWE. So goes to show you, that kind of stuff, parlays into other aspects of entertainment and the sports.
And
So,
Taya Valkyrie as well. She's one of my favorites in AEW,
mhm,
and I remember she was a dancer as well.
yeah. So you just never know where you can end up in this business. People from all walks of life, all walks of entertainment, can come to wrestling. So, and I love how inclusive it's gotten too over the years. You're seeing a lot of diversity.
Yep.
Let's kind of switch gears now. I know you're very passionate about the ALS cause. I saw on social media you had posted a walk happening recently. Talk about that.
So one of my dearest friends in the wrestling business, Ed Malone, he was the one who brought me out to Battleground Championship Wrestling. He runs a company called Go Get 'em Promotions. Black Dahlia is actually the one that got me in touch with him. So he's her agent. And then he booked me to come out to Philadelphia. So it's because of him, her and I got to link up and our dreams started to come true. And when we were there, he was like, I'm having these weird headaches and stuff, and I'm going to the doctors. Like he's very on top of his health, which is great. And I'm like maybe you had COVID because some people after they got COVID, they're struggling to speak,
Hmm.
and he was kind of having some issues speaking. And so he went and got tested, got all these tests done, and found out that he has ALS. And he went and got tested multiple times, three different doctors, and it turns out he has ALS. So it's a very difficult disease to figure out, how do I deal with this? And this man is like the nicest man I've ever met in my life. Like he took such great care of me and my mom. My mom came out with me to Philadelphia, treated us like absolute gold. Like we never went hungry. He's like, do you need a coffee? He would get me coffee. Do you want breakfast? Like we had everything like as we needed it. Literally, we would not miss a meal. We didn't go hungry. He treated us so amazing. And so I really want to just help share that, promote it, and donate to it, and just make people aware of this disease and what we can do to help and help build money for the cause for this amazing man.
Yeah, I mean, if you have somebody in your life that you really care about and really support, love, and they're going through a rough time in their life, I mean, why wouldn't you want to help out, for something like that? I mean, because it's just everybody's going through something. And
Very much.
for so yeah, it's just very sad to hear, that someone that you're close to, is suffering and everybody needs help to some degree.
He has an amazing wife at home, a beautiful daughter who, absolutely idolizes her father. And I just want to let them know that I'm here for them. They are family and I'm family, and I'll do anything to share the cause. And hopefully build more awareness about ALS because it's kind of one of those unknown diseases a lot of people don't know about. So
What is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
I think it's just it fulfills your soul especially when it's such a kind human, and that makes you want to give back even more. So it's not, we live in such a selfish world today, so it feels so good to help people and give back. And when it's something you're passionate about, it's just so much more fulfilling.
Yes, definitely. So going back to wrestling here just quickly, what is your ultimate goal in the business? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
Um, you know, First and foremost, it's about having fun. So if I'm not having fun, I don't want to be doing it anymore. So number one, it's always been about having fun. And I just love having something that belongs to me. It's my thing, my world that I belong in. But I want to travel the world with professional wrestling. So, I've been doing it in Alberta for about 11 years. I'm starting to branch out a little bit in different parts of Canada. I was just in the States in June, so I want to branch out more places in the USA. I want to make it over to England, and eventually I'd love to make it over to Japan. And the main goal is keeping my father's legacy alive as well. So just keeping the Billington name out there. And bottom line is I want to get my dad in the Hall of Fame. So
Yes, let's make
that's
it happen.
the biggest goal here. And just have fun while I'm doing it and make memories and travel the world and branch out in different areas of wrestling that I can. Like, I've been doing so many podcasts, and that's something really great because it really does get my dad's name out there, and just whatever I can to be involved.
This has been such a wonderful conversation. I want to say thank you so much for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find more about you on social media if they want to reach out? And
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, Bronwyne Jewel. That's just my first and middle name. Might be changing that to Dynamite Doll to make it easier or something, but I am on Twitter as well. It's Dynamite Doll 84. I also run my dad's Instagram, so it's official Dynamite Kid. You can find me on Patreon, Dynamite Doll, and I think that's about it. And then anything with merchandise and events and stuff like that, that's going to be posted on all those pages. So. And
awesome.
yeah, you can inbox me. I'm very friendly. I'm always replying to my fans. So please, any questions, or you can hit me up in my inbox.
All right. Well, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Absolutely. We will. As soon as there's talks at Hall of Fame, we'll get back on here and talk about that.
Definitely. Take care.
Bye. Have a great day.
You too.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.